to Evan's family and friends. It's good that you're here today on the day of Pentecost as we celebrate the gifting of the Holy Spirit, life, resurrection life to Evan. One of the interesting things, among many things that I found interesting in Cuba, was the fact that almost on every other corner, especially in Havana Vieja, the old section of Havana, was a church. As many of you know, Cuba had been a possession of Spain for 400 or 500 years. And so, as part of their extension, the Spanish Empire extension, Cuba became a source of lots of attention. And so on every corner in the city, you could find a church. And the most interesting thing about that was that you walk into a building that's 300 or 400 years of age. I've never been to Europe, but there are buildings that are very, very old there. And you walk in, and there on the main altar is usually an image of Mary, some statue of Mary bestowing or remembering a particular virtue, like Our Lady of Charity, Our Lady of Mercy, or some other quality, some other Christian theological virtue. And then above that is usually a cross with the body of Jesus hanging on it. And then above that is usually some image of the throne of God with the Holy Spirit. There may be other sort of statuary up on that main altar, but as well, as you walk in, there are side altars in many of these places. I'm sure you've seen some of these buildings yourselves. Well, the most interesting thing I found was that on every one of these side altars were statues taller than I was. That doesn't say much really, but I mean, huge statues. 6 feet high. It could be St. Anthony or St. Francis or St. Barbara, or just name any of the saints in our history, and there they were, kind of bigger than life. The other interesting thing about this is that, again, these are just reflections and observations. This is not meant as any kind of judgment, but Spanish art has a particular penchant for the gruesome. And so if you look at artists like El Greco and others, you'll see, denoted there, lots of blood and those kinds of things. Well, these statues also depicted sometimes how the person died, or what particular weapon was used, and they were dressed in real clothing. We live in a rather antiseptic kind of environment where we see statues, they're either in wood or plaster, and things are painted on them. But there, they had actual clothing and hair and beards, and it was quite interesting. So you never had a sense of being alone. There were lots of people, people, and we refer to that in the Apostles' Creed, we refer to that as the communion of saints, right? I mean, you understand that. Well, one of the things that I found most interesting, that I'd make it to the chapel that I was right across the street from where my Spanish teacher lived, and I would get to the church, and I would sit at the church for about 45 minutes just to kind of center myself and kind of do some work on my homework, because I was always kind of anxious about that. But it was a quiet place, and it was out of the sun and out of the heat. And when it was 95, 98 degrees, it was nice to find a place that was out of the sun and out of the heat. So I just sat there. No air conditioning. I mean, there's nothing like that. But it was nice to be there in a quiet place. And what I was so amazed by was that over the 3 weeks I was there, I'd sit in the church, and in would walk a person, young man, young woman, older person, and would reverence the altar, and then go over to one of the side altars and make the sign of the cross, and then begin talking, praying to that image. Have you seen people do that? Now, we in our Western logical, rational culture sort of think, gosh, that is really weird. But you know what? In point of fact, it's not. And I think we need to come to understand that perhaps the gifting of the Spirit ought to enhance our understanding of how the Spirit works. And important to note that, you know, we can make fun of or criticize theologically or rationally kind of this cult of the saints that perhaps takes a bit more of a turn than we ought to. But in point of fact, an honoring of the saints is part of our faith, because it was by the gifting of the Spirit that these persons imaged along these side altars were able to be witnesses of the faith in their particular time and place. Whether it be Francis of Assisi, or Anthony of Padua, or Catherine of Siena, a doctor of the church, whoever that person is depicted, it was by the